So welcome, everybody. My name is Linda Bowden. I am the AARP Vermont Volunteer State President. And today we are doing the fifth in our series, our bicycle workshop series, Get Back on Your Bike and Biking Basics. What's fabulous about the program we have been doing is that it's an outreach of the livability program that AARP has put together. And we love to try to come up with programs that enhance the quality of life for people, all of us actually. And check out our website. I'll put it in the chat, but it's aarp.org/VT. And there you'll find all sorts of things, all sorts of programs. We've got cooking programs, we've got paint and sip programs, movies for grown-ups, one-day lectures, and of course, this biking series. And this series is located on the AARP Vermont Facebook, YouTube channel. So you can always go back to it and gather the wisdom from Eliana and others with regards to biking and getting back on your bike. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to Eliana. I will be monitoring the chat, so any questions you have, please don't hesitate to put those in the chat. And Eliana, thank you so much.
Thanks, Linda. Happy to be here with all of you again for our last workshop of the summer. So my name's Eliana Fox. I'm a program coordinator at Local Motion. Today we'll be discussing prepping your bike for winter. Then we'll kind of switch gears to talk about e-bikes. And then finally, we'll talk about sharing stories just to kind of wrap up the series. And I'll say really quickly for those of you who are new, Local Motion is a statewide nonprofit. We advocate for safe streets for biking and walking and livable communities. So our mission very much aligns with what Linda described about AARP. So really grateful for this partnership. So our goal for today is for you to be ready for biking in the fall and the winter. You'll notice a lot of the gear and maintenance stuff that I'll be talking about, we kind of covered in our last workshop. And so hopefully you'll feel like we're building on that a little bit. And then we'll switch gears and talk a bit about e-bikes, what they are, why people ride them. We've had a little bit of stories about that already, which is awesome. And then finally, we'll wrap up the summer session with some sharing stories. We all ride our bikes for different reasons, and sharing our experiences can help us learn from one another. So that's how we'll kind of wrap it up. So really quickly, if you're not familiar with Zoom, here's some quick directions. So you're currently muted with the button in your lower left-hand corner. You can also turn your video on and off if you'd like. You can also change your layout to what you see. Mostly you'll be seeing my presentation, but you can change it to see faces if you want, using that in the upper right-hand corner. If you have a question, please go ahead and type it in the chat. To do that, you click on the chat icon in the lower center of your screen, and then go to the lower right to begin typing. You know, Linda is here monitoring the questions, and so we're hoping to have plenty of time at the end to get to them. So without further ado, let's get started with a quick overview of our ABC Quick Check, because it's always a good way to start, and it's important for prepping your bike for winter and fall riding also. Okay, so as a reminder, before you ride, make sure your bike is in safe working condition. And you should always plan to do this a few days before you're planning to ride. And so the great thing about our ABC Quick Check is that you can see and feel for issues, air in your tires, brakes that are tight enough and working, your chain is clean and not gritty, and then checking your quick release levers around your seat post and your wheels, and finally giving it one quick check all over. So checking your drivetrain and your pressure are especially important for winter riding, and I will talk about that a little bit later on in the presentation. So for your air in the tires, you can do a thumb test. Make sure your tire does not compress more than ½ an inch, If it's too low, make sure you're pumping it up. Your air pressure range is on the side of your tire, your PSI. And in the wintertime, we'll talk about, keeping your tires on the lower end of that range to make sure that you're getting grip in the snowy conditions. So your brakes, both brakes should be tight enough that you can fit maybe a thumb between the lever and the handlebar, and that's how you know they're adjusted and they're tight enough. And another way you can check it is by holding the brakes and trying to move your bike forward to make sure that your bike would stop when you're going down a hill. Your chain should be rust free. Try pedaling your pedals backwards and your chain should move smoothly and not feel like it's catching. If it's a little dry, you can add chain lube. We'll talk about different types of chain lube for winter versus summer riding also in this presentation. And then you should also check your quick release levers. They should be closed tightly enough that nothing is moving, but loose enough, or not loose enough, but easy enough to open and close. And then the last thing you can do is check your bike all over. The tip I like to tell people is you can lift up your bike an inch or so off the ground and drop it and just listen for any loose rattling. That way you know you're really good to go. Okay, so we know that there are a lot of challenges to winter biking. It's cold, the weather can be a deterrent with snow and ice, and also our infrastructure, where we like to ride on bike lanes, on bike paths, they may be unplowed, unsalted, slippery. And so some of the best ways for you to overcome those challenges are to, one, have the right gear, make sure your bike is prepared, and make sure you are prepared by trying out your winter ride close to home before you actually go out. Okay, so winter gear for your bike, you might already have some of this stuff, but it's worth reiterating. Definitely lights. Winter days are shorter and colder, and riding in the snow, it can be harder to see you if from a driver's perspective, if you're riding in a snowstorm and have a little bit of limited visibility. Fenders, you may have those already if you like to ride in the rain or what have you, or in the mud. But those are really good for protecting your body from the slush and water that gets kicked up from snow. You can see in that parking lot, there's tons of slush. And if you don't have fenders, that gets picked up right by your tire and will splash you on your back, your behind, you name it, you'll get soaked. So fenders are really good for the winter. And then the last thing you might consider are a studded tire, which are little, metal beads in your tire, or a wider tire to get kind of cut through that snow a little bit better. And then as for the gear that you wear, if you're a skier, you probably already have most of this. You probably have rain pants or waterproof snow pants. Glasses or goggles are really important because it's hard to see if you're biking through some snowy precipitation. It's also a good rule of thumb to have glasses or goggles just to protect your eyes more generally. You definitely want boots or shoe covers. Like I said, that snow slush gets kicked up and your feet will get wet. A thin hat or a buff, just something that fits under your helmet to keep your ears warm. So with a buff, you can kind of pull it up over your ears, or a thin hat you can pull down over your ears. The next thing, layering, much like you would do if you're walking outside, if you're skiing, doing really anything during the winter, you want to have layers, base layer, a mid layer, and an outer waterproof shell. So we talked about those rain pants. That's kind of one piece of your outer shell. And the last thing is mittens or gloves. Super crucial when you're riding a bike because your hands are exposed out on those handlebars, so they will get cold quickly. Like I said, it's exposed, you're facing wind plus the cold air. A lot of people here, if they're hardcore riders, opt for bar mitts also. And those you can order online or find at a bike shop. And those you can just Velcro onto your handlebars to keep your hands even more protective. It's like a little nylon shell. So that's really helpful for wintertime also. Okay. So a few winter prep basics. You don't need a new bike or a different bike. Some people do choose to ride with what I would call as a beater bike. And that's because winter is really tough on your bike, the conditions and the salt on the road, that sort of thing. So the constant moisture, salt, sand in the road can wreak havoc on your bike quickly. And so that means cleaning after every ride is really important. And like I said, some people do have that beater bike because they know that it can get wrecked pretty quickly riding in the winter. The next thing, we talked about tire pressure a little bit with that ABC quick check. So in the winter, you're going to want your tire on the lower end of that PSI range. And here's why. You don't want to go under that range, but lowering your tire pressure basically, it creates more surface area for your tire to cut through the snow. So it gives you a little more grip. So if you think about how a pancake flattens and you get a little more surface area as the pancake flattens out on the pan, your tire is kind of similar. And so the more surface area your tire has on the road, the better grip you're going to have because more of your tire is touching the road, if that makes sense. And so, that's really helpful for stability and that sort of thing. And then another thing you want to do before you go out on a winter ride or commute is practice close to home. For a few minutes, you'll notice how your body heats up and you can kind of figure out what layers work best for you. You can decide if your bike is set up enough to go through that snowy commute. As I mentioned previously, lights are super, super important in the winter. The days are shorter, as I mentioned, and snow makes visibility harder. Plus, in the cold, your light's batteries tend to die faster. So you may consider, if you have rechargeable lights, carrying a charging cable with you. I always carry a charging cable with my bike lights. You can also, if you don't have a charging cable, bring an extra set of batteries or just an extra set of lights altogether. You don't want to be caught out in the snow or in the dark without lights. Okay. So winter bike care. You may remember in our previous presentation, we talked about the importance of drivetrain cleaning. Well, it's even more important in the winter. You need to clean your bike after every single ride, as I mentioned, just because the salt and dirt and sludge that gets kicked up during winter riding accumulates really quickly and causes corrosion really quickly. So, for me, the first time I went riding in the snow, after my first ride, my chain was rusty and I was shocked, but it happens that quickly. And so it's as simple as taking some warm soapy water and spraying it down, wiping it down after every single ride. So our tip here is warm water, maybe a little dish soap works well, and just squeeze that onto the gears, the chain. And I would also recommend, you'll see in this picture, this person sponging kind of their rim and their spokes. I would recommend that too, because the little area where your spoke connects to your rim gets rusted really, really easily too. So those are good places to also wipe down. And so after you rinse your bike, be sure to re-lube your chain. And so you can consider using what's called wet lube in the chain. And so the difference with wet lube is that it's good for wet, muddy, and humid conditions. It stays on your chain a little bit longer, so it protects it longer than dry lube does. However, wet lube holds onto more grit and grime because it's kind of tackier, thicker. And so it holds on to that dirt and grime, whereas dry lube, which is what you would use in the summer, the dry months, kind of repels the dirt. And so it keeps your chain clean longer, but it doesn't repel that moisture the same way that wet lube does. So that's what I do. I use wet lube in the wintertime and dry lube in the summer seasons. And then lastly, we talked about this in our last presentation also, but it's really important to store your bike inside when you're not using it, in a garage, basement, if you can, just because the elements, the snow, the salt, the moisture can erode your parts really, really quickly. Okay, so we're going to switch gears now and talk about e-bikes. They're new, they're very popular, they come in all different shapes and sizes. I was reading an article yesterday that e-bikes are so popular, in the US. Sales increased 190% in June 2020 compared to June 2019. So this video is just going to give you a quick overview of what e-bikes are.
Hi, I'm Nicole and this is Jason. We're charged up about e-bikes. We ride them, sell them, and really enjoy them.
And we're here to tell you some of the basics of e-bikes.
E-bikes are similar to regular bikes, but with a boost. E-bike sales are doubling every year, which helps support local economies with jobs and tax revenue. And of course, there's more e-bike use on roads and trails.
Okay, so we hope this video sheds some light on what e-bikes are and who's buying them and riding them, and how they enhance the rider's experience.
From parents riding e-cargo bikes to cart kids and groceries around town instead of driving,
To recreational pedalers and mountain bikers looking to add some fun and distance to their weekend rides.
to seniors and folks with different abilities who need a little extra help to enjoy their favorite rides.
To commuters who want to skip the traffic jams, parking hassles, and still get to work feeling fresh.
So let's look at the 3 different classes of e-bikes.
Much like the different classes of cars and drivers, the 3-class system for e-bikes aligns everyone from city planners to manufacturers around a common understanding.
This 3-class system for categorizing e-bikes has been adopted in many state vehicle codes and even in state and local park regulations. Class 1 is a pedal assist e-bike with a top motor assisted speed of 20 miles an hour when the motor stops helping you.
Class 2 is the same as a Class 1, but with a throttle assist and a top motor assisted speed of 20 miles an hour also.
Class 3 is a pedal assist e-bike with a top motor assisted speed of 28 miles an hour.
In many states, Class 1 and 2 are allowed to ride wherever a traditional bike goes. Class 3 is generally allowed on the street due to their higher top speed.
In the US, e-bikes are required to display a label showing their class, top assisted speed, and wattage. So it's easy to see which class of bike you're looking at.
That's for state vehicle codes, which deal with roads and bike paths. On natural single-track trails, laws and regulations vary. Go to peopleforbikes.org/ebikes to learn more about e-bike movement and how more and more jurisdictions are adopting this harmonized 3-class system.
Thanks for watching. And if you haven't tried an e-bike yet, what are you waiting for? Hi, I'm Nicole.
Okay, so hopefully that gave you a quick overview of the different kinds of e-bikes. So e-bikes in Vermont operate the same way in that 3-class system that was talked about, and that's kind of the gold standard in the US right now. Most states have adopted that. So municipal and local authorities and state agencies with jurisdiction can prohibit the operation of Class 1 and 2 e-bikes on paths if it finds that such restriction is needed for safety reasons, but mostly Class 1 and 2 e-bikes are regulated really similarly to regular bikes. And so when those changes happen, it requires a notice and a public hearing. With Class 3 e-bikes, however, they can be prohibited kind of without any notice. And most e-bikes that you find around your town are probably Class 1 or Class 2. So here are a couple examples from local motions fleet. These are traditional e-bikes. They're just like regular bikes, only they have a battery, a motor, usually a small screen, and sometimes they'll have a throttle. Like we said, those Class 2 e-bikes have throttles. These extra parts mean that they are heavier than regular bikes. So something to consider if you're thinking about an e-bike is that they're a little bit harder to maneuver, they're heavier, and that's because, like I said, the battery, the motor, it all adds weight, and because the frame itself is heavier, the parts are also heavier duty. So the tires are thicker and heavier, specially made for e-bikes. Most of them come with fenders and racks. So, these bikes are probably looking at least 40 pounds or so. And this is a regular commuter style e-bikes. And for these kinds of bikes, the battery range is totally dependent on how you ride them. So if you're on the terrain, if you're going up and down a bunch of hills, how much cargo you might be carrying with you, how much you use that electric assist. But with these bikes, both these are level 1, so that means they just have that pedal assist. You're probably looking at least 40 miles of range, but most likely more than that. You know, probably closer to 50, 60, even 70 you could get on this bike. And like I said, it's dependent on all of those factors. Okay, so e-bikes also come in a cargo style. So on the left-hand side, you'll see this is a long tail cargo bike, and the right-hand side is called a cargo bucket. And so these are really good if you have kids or grandkids. You can put them in the bucket, or you can attach seats to that rear cargo rack. Also good for running errands, like going to the grocery store. You can carry a bunch of stuff on these. And these are even heavier than the regular traditional e-bikes, right? So this orange bike on the left, you're talking probably 70 pounds at least. And that's not including any cargo you might be thinking about carrying. So just be aware that they're heavier, they're harder to maneuver, but they're also really good for being able to carry things and run errands. They're really practical in that sense. And so with that weight, the range is a little bit lower, right? So, and all of those considerations I mentioned earlier, like hills, your cargo weight will make the battery range vary, but with these, a good rule of thumb is you'll probably get at least 20, but maybe up to 40 miles on a battery range, depending on how you use it. This orange bike on the left here is a class 2, so it does have a throttle, right? And so if you use the throttle exclusively to get around and you're not really pedaling that much, that drains your battery super, super quickly. So you might only have a couple hours of battery if you just use the throttle. But if you're pedaling using just the assist and the throttle every once in a while, you're going to get a decent range out of that. So some cargo e-bikes are actually cargo e-trikes or tricycles, 3-wheeled bikes. And this is a pretty heavy duty one. I'm pretty sure this is Burlington Parks and Rec or DPW. And so some, municipal departments, businesses use these kinds of electric bikes for work purposes, hauling gardening materials, what have you, to different work sites. So it's really cool, really a neat way to do that. Not all electric trikes look this intense. Some of them are quite a bit smaller. And what's nice about that is that third wheel provides some level of stability, right? So if you have some balance issues or what have you, the electric trikes are really good. My supervisor here at Locomotion, she is partially deaf, and so her balance is not good. And she recently got an electric trike with a small cargo area in the front, and she's now able to bike around with her, her school age kid, which has been, really life-changing for her. So something to think about is that electric bikes come in all shapes and sizes, and they help people overcome all different kinds of barriers. So generally, e-bikes have 2 different motor types. And I say this generally because there are some different kinds of bikes, but the majority of bikes you see in shops and the ones that I showed here are what's called hub drive or a mid drive. So the hub drive is in your rear wheel hub. So that's called a hub. And so that's where the motor is. So the nice thing about hub drive is they're generally less expensive. They're generally more durable. They cause less wear on your drivetrain, so your derailleur, your cassette, your chain. So that's really nice about hub drives. The cons is that it's harder to remove that rear wheel. So say you get a flat tire on your rear wheel, you have to know how to disconnect the motor from your battery and remove the wheel. So that limits what kind of wheel you can get and what kind of tire you can get, and also your ability to remove that wheel. So just something to consider right? And then with the mid drive, which you can see on the right side of your screen, what's nice about mid drive, some of the pros, it's the weight is distributed a little better because, as you can see, it's kind of in the middle of the frame of your bike. It's right below where you're pedaling, so it doesn't feel like there's more weight towards one end of the bike, if that makes sense. It feels a little more natural, I guess you could say, when you're riding, because because of that location. Some things to consider with mid drives: they're generally more expensive. And they also cause increased drivetrain stress and wear because that motor in the center of your bike is kind of pulling that chain pretty hard, if that makes sense. So these are both really common, drives for motors for e-bikes, and just things to consider if you're thinking about getting an e-bike of your own. I'm not an expert. I wouldn't point you either way. It's down to how you would like to ride your bike. So just some things to think about. So in case you didn't know, Vermont has tons of electric utilities that are offering rebates for e-bike purchases. So if you live within Green Mountain Power Range, Burlington Electric Department, Washington Electric Co-op, which is in the Montpelier area, the Vermont Public Power Supply Authority, Stowe Electric Department got a rebate started this year. So depending on what utility, who your utility provider is, you can get that rebate, and they work differently. Some of them are point of sale. So if you're a Green Mountain Power or Burlington Electric customer, you can go to a shop and they will immediately apply that rebate at checkout, basically. With others, you have to send a proof of purchase to the utility provider and they will send you a check, basically. There are also opportunities for a lower no interest loan to purchase an e-bike through a couple different credit unions here. And then most recently, and what I'm really excited about, so the most recent transportation bill in the Vermont legislature included a $200 incentive for e-bike purchases. So that passed July 1 of this year and will go into effect in January. So if you're thinking about buying an e-bike in the next year, might be a good time, so you'll have, depending on your utility provider, you get a couple hundred there, and forthcoming state incentive is going to be $200. So that's really exciting. And it's great that we live in a state that is supporting e-bike adoption so much. Okay, so studies have shown that e-bikes help people overcome barriers and increase bicycle use by replacing car trips. So some of you may remember Bevan, who is one of our regional coordinators here at Locomotion. And she uses her electric cargo bike to haul garbage to the dump, which is a trip that you might normally have to take by car. So e-bikes really provide that opportunity. And she has one of those long tail cargo bikes. So, a lot of carrying capacity. And I believe she got that bike at Old Spokes Home in Burlington. So she took advantage of, a no interest loan basically to get that bike. So really great opportunity and example. Another example of a person who rides an e-bike is Spence in Weybridge, and he switched to an e-bike so that he could keep riding bikes, which he loves, despite having, knee issues. And so, like I said, really helps overcome those barriers for all different kinds of people. You could be a parent who doesn't want to drive their kid to school anymore because of the traffic. An e-bike helps you overcome that. As we talked about before this presentation started, you may live in a super hilly area and not be able to get up those hills anymore, and an e-bike can help overcome that. So with that being said, why do you ride? For me, biking is transportation to the office, to the grocery store, to appointments, you name it. I live in a one-car household, and so it's my way to get around, but people bike for all different kinds of reasons. You may bike for exercise or recreation or fun, or just running errands, or to go see your family, or other reasons. And so I think at this point, I'll invite everyone if they would like to share with why they ride. What do you think, Linda?
Great idea. I know one of the chat messages I just put up was, you know, your e-bike or your bicycle can be your second car. And I love that phrase. I've heard it before, and it really makes sense for all of the reasons that you've said. So when we were talking with Deborah earlier, she was saying she rides her bike to go to the library and to the grocery store and the post office and other places like that. Where else might you go ride? Is there something that somebody would like to add in there? You can, at this point, put your comments in the chat or just unmute yourself. That would be fine. I can only see a couple pictures. I might pick on somebody. Kevin, how about you? Can you unmute yourself? Let me know where you ride.
Somehow I knew you were going to do that. Well, I actually do use it as a second car. I've actually gotten to the point now that unless I'm leaving the area, my car just never gets used, or in the wintertime, because I'm not that comfortable riding in the winter. But I also live on a large hill in St. Albans. So if you know anything about St. Albans, it's actually done a very, very nice job in the last few years getting sidewalks up to snuff and bike paths and the like. So now with an e-bike, I can just get up my hill really easily. Although I rarely, you know, you talked about how much you use the motor. I think I use the motor 5%. I still usually just bike regularly, but it gives me that added support if I'm going up my hill to my house, that I can do it now and I don't have to walk it up.
Yeah, that's a great point. All I was going to say, Kevin's right. You can use an e-bike as a regular bike. You don't have to have your pedals just on at all. It rides like a normal bike. You may just turn it on when you need to get up those hills. So that's a great point.
It's definitely a way to get better exercise, is to not have the motor on all the time.
Great. So a couple comments that I'm seeing in the chat. Jean has mentioned that she loves to go on the rail trail in Danville. And also Deborah has mentioned that the rail train along, I think she meant trail along the West River. Londonderry to Townsend is good. I got up early. I was mentioning before and got up and was out on the trail at 6:30, the bike path that we have here in Burlington, which was really a good time because there weren't many people that were on the trail. I see quite a few in this picture, but yeah. Any other stories out there?
I'd like to just say that I think I mentioned earlier that, you know, if I don't have the time, like say to go on a big ride or something, which is most often the case, but I just jump on my bike to go to the post office, which is 3 miles down and 3 miles up to get back. But I did a calculation several months ago, like if I drive my car 3 miles down, 3 miles back, so 6 miles, and I only do it 5 days a week, say, it cost me over $1,000 in petrol. So, I mean, I know that's a staggering thought, but it was true. I worked it out. And I think that that's something to all of us to think about. If you can get on a bike and help save our planet or our climate change, do our little bit every day, like driving to the post office, go get a coffee, meet a friend, don't jump in the car. It's really, I think little incremental things like that can make a big difference.
I think you're exactly right with regards to that, Deborah. The other thing I wanted to mention is that AARP Vermont has been very much involved in the transportation issues with regards to making things more livable. They were pushing for the rebates for the e-bikes and also trying to enhance quality of life through, making protected bike lanes and that sort of thing. So many opportunities there if folks are wanting to volunteer their time through AARP Vermont, you can get in touch with me. But, just thinking about how we can help promote biking is a great way to do that. So let me see if there's anything else in the chat. Here's a question for you from Tree, Eliana. An e-bike would possibly be harder to transport if you are taking a ride out of town because it is so heavy. What do you think about that, Eliana?
Yes, I was typing a response, but it's better to say to everyone. So yeah, that's a great point. So an e-bike, you can sometimes, depending on how big your car is, you can fit it in the trunk or in a truck bed would work. Probably if you have one of those hitch racks on your car, those might be sturdy enough to hold it. We don't send our e-bikes out on racks just because we've had them fall off before and that damages them. So yeah, you have to be careful using racks with e-bikes because they are so heavy. And yeah, getting in them even into your trunk or into your truck bed, you definitely need a second person. So that is definitely a challenge of bringing your e-bike elsewhere. So that's a good point, Tree.
Yeah, and I think it's also important to just ask where you purchase your e-bike if they have suggestions, because they would know about that. And I'm seeing all kinds of comments coming up that there are e-bike racks. Paula is mentioning that. And also Thule has a great tray rack with a ramp that you can look at. One final question before we continue here, because there are so many great messages. Rick is asking, do you recommend a spare battery to take one of those along with you?
I think it depends on how much you're planning on riding. So in our previous presentations, we talked about preparing for your ride and planning out a route. So if you know you're going to be riding for an entire day, maybe, or longer, you might consider an extra battery. But with those, the regular commuter style, traditional style e-bikes, you have a really decent range on those and you can ride them like regular bikes. So it really depends on how you're planning to use your bike.
Great. One final thing, Jean suggested taking the battery off the bike when using a bike rack to reduce weight. So there's another comment with regards to that. Okay, I think we're ready to get going again. Thank you.
Great. So I just wanted to conclude by recapping our entire summer series. So this is obviously the last one. And I hope what you've taken away are some knowledge and skills that make you feel a little more confident biking on the road, planning out your routes, working on your own bikes to some extent, and biking that extra mile. So as we kind of mentioned at the top, you can find the recordings of all of these workshops on AARP Vermont's YouTube. I have it linked here, but yeah, if you just look up AARP Vermont YouTube, you will be able to find that really easily. And so we went over biking basics, rules of the road. We talked about the different trails all across Vermont. A bunch of you mentioned in the chat the different rail trails that you bike on. So our June presentation went over some of those and how to find them and how to plan for those. In July, we talked about ways to extend your ride and go a little bit further. Last month, we talked about maintenance, which was really fun for me personally. And, ways that you can keep your bike maintained and in good shape so that you can ride longer and further without having to take it for a bike shop, without, having to do a full tune-up and that sort of thing. So just wanted to recap that. And I feel like it's been a really fun summer series. And some of you have been here for the whole thing. So thanks for that.
Great.
And lastly, we do have a couple of events. So the Tour de Farms is next weekend, the 18th. And AARP members do get a 5% discount. I did check the website. So advanced registration for that event is now closed. It's filled up, which is really exciting. However, they do have I think like 50 or so day of registrations available, and that is at the Virgins Union High School. So if that's something you're still thinking about doing, there are a few spots left if you show up the day of.
I'll be there.
And then secondly, Richard's Ride, and this is in Richmond, Vermont, in October. So this event is organized to celebrate the life of a local cyclist there. And so they have a couple of different staged rides. They have a long road ride. They have some mountain bikey things. They have shorter gravel loops. So I would recommend checking that out if you're interested. They have a lot of different types of group rides that they're putting on with that. So it's worth checking out. And that's all I have for you today. Does anyone have any other questions?
I think what I'd love to do, if it's okay with you, is stop sharing and let's put everybody up on the screen,
Sure.
Eliana, and we can ask if there are any questions. There we go. And anything else that people would like to share. One wonderful way we have used this time is to think about different sorts of equipment that you folks may have found that are useful in riding. We've had some folks talk about different mirrors and different pumps that they've used for their bicycles. So at this point in time, if folks would like to unmute themselves or raise their hand, I'd be glad to pick on you and have you share those kinds of tips. And also if there is, getting back to rides, I'd really love, we have a few minutes, love to know what rides people enjoy. I think several have said the rail trails, right? And Eliana, where is a map, a good place to find a map for those kinds of trails?
Yeah, so there are a couple of different resources you can check out. The All Trails app is really good. And then the other one is escaping me, but I can look it up really quickly. And I do want to mention, so Jean, I think you mentioned the trail in Danville. Is that the Lamoille Valley? I don't know if Jean's still on, but
she is, but she's muted right now.
So I just read an article recently that another section of the Lamoille Valley Rail Trail is completed, kind of the northeast western section of it around Swanton. So in one of our earlier presentations, we talked about, when that trail might be finished. Well, another section of it just got completed. So now there's a whole 12-mile section in that part of the state, which is really exciting. It just got.
I rode that yesterday.
Oh yeah, that's awesome.
It's from Sheldon to Highgate, so
Yes.
it's right up to the border.
Right. Yes, I just read about it.
That's awesome.
Evan?
Where do you find these trails? I mean, how do you find where all these are around the state?
So one resource I recommended is Trail Finder or All Trails. And these are like websites and apps you can download on your phone. The All Trails app is pretty useful.
There's also Map My Ride, right? Mm-hmm. And Trail Finder, yeah, you said that. All Trails.
And I'm trying to remember one of the ones I talked about in one of our previous presentations, and the name is just escaping me.
Wait till you're our age.
Well, there's a great map too, Eliana, on your website. that
Go
you
for it.
can go to Local Motion, and it shows the one in Burlington, I know, as far as the rail trail goes, or the bike path that we have, which potentially could go all the way to Canada. And it also has interactive places, so restaurants that you can go to and other sorts of things. There's the ferry that takes you away across the causeway. And Eliana, how long will that ferry be running?
So
You
it
know?
runs, the ferry runs until October, but it is now down to weekend service only. So after Labor Day, it's only running on the weekends. So no more weekday rides, unfortunately, but yes, it runs until October.
Deborah, is your hand raised there, or
Oh, yeah, sorry, I'm just just thinking.
just making sure?
No, I was going to say that I think it's, if you're going to invest in a, in my case, like an e-bike, that I got a very sturdy, I can't remember if it's Thule or another one, but if you go to any good reputable bike store, like I did, the Norse House up near in Stratton, Bonneville, and I got a really heavy duty, great bike rack, and it is heavy to put it on, but I brought my bike to Long Island. I went out to see family and I rode all over Amagansett and Montauk, and it was fabulous. And I took that bike and my grandson's, his little bike there with me, and, strapped it on and was on the Long Island Expressway. And it was fantastic. And the riding out there is beautiful, flat through farmlands, the ocean, et cetera. So I think if you're going to really invest in a good bike, that you should give yourself the pleasure of being able to go other places. Like, I'd love to come up to Burlington if I can find a cheap hotel room somewhere and ride around there. And I think, doesn't Stowe have a great bike rail around, or bike trail or something? And I feel I get so mired in being in southern Vermont and I don't really leave, and I should go north, Woodstock, Stowe, Burlington, but
Yeah.
So
Yes, and I looked up another resource that we talked about in our trail options presentation. It's called Trail Finder, and that is Vermont specific, and that has really great info about all of the rail trails and whatnot. So that's the one I would recommend if you're looking for the different rail trails all around the state. And that has Vermont and New Hampshire, but really useful for looking at all of the different trails.
And Eliana has put that in the chat, so you can copy that and have it that way.
I have one question. I apologize if it's off topic, but it's an issue dear to my heart on biking. I'm just wondering if there are ways, or if there are already things being done through Local Motion on educating non-bicyclists about the rules of the road for bicycles. I think it's something that when I'm on the road and not on trails, happens to me almost every single time I go out.
Yeah, do a lot of education around interaction with vulnerable users. So people on bikes, people walking. So one thing, for example, I did this year was I did a presentation to a driver's ed class. So new drivers, about how they should be driving around vulnerable users. So we do all sorts of stuff around education like that, workshops. And it definitely, you're right, it's a challenge, and we're doing our best. And I think some ways that bikers and walkers and everyone can be good advocates is following the rules of the road ourselves, right? It can be a challenge when you feel like people who are driving don't follow the same rules, but safety is, in my vision, a two-way street. So as a biker, I'll respect you and follow the rules of the road, and you as a driver respect all the rules of the road. So yeah, so to answer your question, Kevin, yes, we do our best to educate people who are driving around vulnerable users.
And I might add, I'm not blaming
No,
the drivers, because a lot of times they just have it in their mind that we're like pedestrians.
right.
And they're not doing anything wrong, or yeah, they are doing something wrong, but they're not doing it intentionally.
Yeah.
It's just that they don't understand.
Yeah.
I think that's a really important point. There's a real contention between drivers and bicyclists. And actually, Kevin, one of my ulterior motives in putting this workshop together, this series, is to try to enable seniors getting back on their bikes to be the numbers of riders on the road that people will see, and they will advocate for protected bike lanes and the sorts of tools on the road that we need, advocate for those. But being present in your city council, in your neighborhood groups, speaking out, there's so many of us boomers out there. Let's put our numbers together and say, hey, let's all respect it. But to your point also, I would love to see in the rules of the road, manuals that they have for drivers, a little bit more, beef up that kind of information about bicyclists being another vehicle on the road, as you've mentioned many times, and need to be given space. And, I've been educating my husband. I say, take the road, you are able to in this one dicey section in downtown Burlington. So I think we need to understand that sort of thing too. So all of you now, by attending some of our workshops, have learned, have been empowered. You could go to the YouTube channel and see the other 4 presentations. And how many folks, just a raise of hands, if that would be possible, or if you prefer chat, have been able to attend all of the sessions or view all of the sessions? Oh, I see a thumbs up. Great. And okay, we have the potential of folks going back and visiting the YouTube. So that's awesome. Great. We've got several people clapping, and yeah, it's been a great series. Okay, I just see KO is still planning on getting that bike out of the barn. So that's awesome, and having it checked out. But with that, where do you find the recorded sessions? Those are on the AARP Vermont YouTube channel. So you could go to YouTube and just put AARP Vermont Biking Basics, and you'll find that YouTube channel.
Yeah. And I also just put the link to it in the chat. If you just click on that link, you'll be taken to YouTube. So you should see AARP Vermont pop up.
Great. Great.
Thank you very much. It was great.
Okay. Well, thank you all. It has been fabulous. Eliana, thank you so much for your and Local Motion's partnership in this program. Thrilled to death that AARP Vermont has been able to bring these programs to our wonderful AARP audience. So thanks, folks. Have a good day. Get out there and ride, and hope to see you on the trail soon, right?
Yes.
Okay. All right.
Bye-bye.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.